Hello, how's it going? So in this video, I'd like to demonstrate some techniques for transferring a preliminary sketch onto something else. So you can see here, I've got some preliminary sketches, some little 2" by 2" designs on sheets of tracing paper. These are preliminary sketches and I want to be able to work them up into fully developed realized designs. So after I sketch out my initial designs here on tracing paper, I want to then transfer them to something else so that I can continue modifying these designs, improving them, and making changes as needed. So you'll need your sketches, you'll need whatever you're going to transfer them onto, starting off here with pencil and some tape. So the first technique that I'm going to show you here involves getting some light behind your work. Alright, so I've got my window here, and the first thing I want to do is to tape my preliminary sketch to the window. I'm using a 3M painter's tape. It's got a low tack adhesive, so when I pull it off here, it shouldn't damage my paper. So this gets some light behind our sketches, and then the next thing I want to do is to grab my sheet of Bristol here that I'm going to transfer the design onto. You can see I've got some already transferred on here, got a few more to go. So I'm going to transfer one to this middle square. So I'm going to place it right up against the glass to where I can see the sketches through my Bristol paper here, and then I'm going to line it up with the design I want to transfer. Once I've got it lined up, then I'll tape down my sheet of Bristol. And then the next step, since I can see my design right through there, is simply to trace it. I'm tracing it really lightly with pencil. Once I've got it traced, I'm going to remove the tape. And I'll take it over here to the desk so we can see it a little better. Alright, so here in this middle design is my tracing. And you can see the line work is a little sketchy, right? And my original design had this design here, smoother. This one had smoother curves, more gradual curves, more flowing curves, not so jagged and sketchy, right? So I can't rely just on my tracing. Once the tracing is done at the window, I need to go back over and make corrections to my design by resketching it and improving the line work. It helps to have the original design right next door. Can look at it and make those comparisons a little easier. If I used a shape template to make any of these curves, which I believe I did in this design, I can resketch these curves so that they're a little more consistent using my shape template. So that's our first technique. A light table would also work well if you don't have access to daylight or window. Another technique to transfer it over is to take the initial sketch and the side that has graphite on it, the side I drew on, I'm going to place it face down so that it's in contact. The graphite, the drawing itself, is in contact with my Bristol. Right? So this is tracing paper. I've got my sketch drawn on this side, so I'm laying it face down, flipping it over and laying it face down on the Bristol. I'm going to tape it down. And again, I'm taping my design right to my Bristol, which I don't want to damage. All right, so I want to make sure I'm using a low tack tape. I've lined it up with the square I want to transfer it to, so I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move. And then I'm simply going to trace these marks on the back side of my preliminary sketch. And I'm just using a pencil and some moderate pressure, not a whole lot. a little bit. So I've got all my marks transferred. I'm going to gently pull up the tape. And what we should have are some faint marks of the design underneath there. So the next thing I want to do is to go back and retrace them again directly on the design, darken them up, thicken the lines up if I need to, and make any corrections to any sketchiness, right? So if I used my shape template, which I probably did, I can bring that back in to redraw some of these lines a little more cleanly and go from there. It's important to note if you use this technique that it reverses your design. It gets flipped, right? I'm not too concerned about that with this project. My design works well either way. I'm happy with it either way, so I'm okay with that reversal. But if you've got an image or a design that has text in it, when you reverse that, it's going to reverse the text. It's going to reverse whatever imagery you have in there. So you just have to keep that in mind. If it messes up your design, if it doesn't work flipped, then you'll have to use a different technique. The other important thing to note with this technique is that you're basically drawing on the back side of your original design, and it's probably just going to ruin this initial sketch here. It doesn't look too bad. I could go in and try to erase that, but just keep that in mind. And I'm okay with that for now because I already took some good photos of my original sketch. So if it gets messed up a little bit because I traced on the back, then that's not a problem. So for my next technique, I'm going to transfer this particular design here, and I'm going to flip it over. So on the back side of this design I want to transfer, I'm going to cover it with a layer of graphite. I'm using a mechanical pencil, but any graphite pencil will work. Not pressing really hard, and I'm just going to get a thin layer of graphite over the back. Next thing I want to do is to get my sheet of paper that I'm going to transfer it onto. Got my Bristol here, and I'm going to flip my tracing paper back over so that that layer of graphite that I just laid down is in contact with my Bristol. And I'm going to line up the squares with each other if I can still see them. I can still kind of see them in there. And I'm going to tape it down. And I'm going to retrace my original sketch here right on top of it. This particular design is made up of straight lines, and my tracings are not going to be very straight. They're going to be a little wobbly here and there, so I'm just going to keep that in mind. I'm going to have to go back over these again when I'm done tracing. So I've got everything traced over. I'll remove my sketch, and I should see a faint tracing of the design there. So now I can go back in and I'll bring in my ruler, straight edge, and refine these lines that are kind of sketchy. Right? So it's the same story with any of these techniques, right? We're going to have to go back over and correct. One point to make about this technique is that you basically covering the back side of your original sketch here with graphite, and it's going to get really messy, probably going to ruin your sketch, right? So before you use this technique, before you cover the back side with graphite, I recommend getting good photos of your sketches first. And then of course the last technique is to simply freehand it. I'm going to choose this design here, and I'm going to transfer this sketch, this design, over to this square here. I'm going to try to get them as close as I can to each other so that I have that direct side-by-side comparison. This particular design uses straight lines again, so it would be really easy if I wanted to to, take measurements, line by line. Say I start with this line right through the center here. So what I can do is pick a starting point on the left, say here, and measure up from the bottom left corner. It's about 15/16 up. I'll come over here to my new design, transfer that point. The ending point over here on the right is up from the bottom right corner, and it looks like it's about 1.1 inches up from that corner. Measure over 1.1 inches up on my new design here. Place a mark. With my ruler, connect those 2 points. You want to tape your sheet down better than I have, so it doesn't move around. There we go. And so that's my first line, and then I just repeat that process for all the other lines. But I could use this the outer boundaries of the composition to get measurements, and then plot points using a ruler. Freehanding it is another technique that you could use to transfer a design over. All right, so those are some techniques to transfer your design over. There are others. You could come up with your own too. A couple of things to keep in mind. Always make sure that you get some good photos of your original sketches before you do any transferring. And then remember also that once your design is transferred over to the Bristol, you're going to need to retrace it and correct the line work. Tracings are usually pretty sketchy, and they're usually kind of a watered down version of the original. So you always want to make sure that you go back, look at the original design, compare them side by side, and make any changes and modifications and improvements to the tracing that you need to do. So I hope you find these tips helpful, and we'll see you.